Hey guys, it's Scott from fxmissions.com. Just a note, I've finished the trilogy of anthologies from the forefront, and all 3 books are currently available on Amazon.
Welcome to Foundational Missions Leadership Moment. Join your host, Scott McClelland of FX Missions, as he deep dives into the lives of leaders to glean secrets that will propel today's leaders to new heights. Here's Scott.
Hi, Scott McClelland here with your FX Missions Leadership Moment. Thanks for joining us. Hey, kind of a special recording today, a special session, kind of a mic flip, if you will. I'm on Shayna Rattler's podcast here of Shayna Speaks. She's been on the podcast a couple of times. So Shayna had me on the show, and I thought you guys would maybe enjoy hearing my perspective a little bit as she questions me and as we go through some things there. So thanks for joining us. Tell someone about the FX Missions Leadership Moment, and many blessings to you.
I am so excited to have our guest today, Scott McClelland. And this time I have the opportunity to be on the other side of the microphone. Scott is actually the host of 2 different podcasts that I'm going to share some information with you on. And I've had the pleasure of being interviewed on both of those podcasts earlier in this year of 2020. And so now he is gracing us with his presence and his knowledge and his experience. And so let me just read some brief information about Scott, and then we will bring him into this conversation about faith and leadership. Scott McClelland is a small business owner and short-term missionary. He has been involved in ministry and church leadership since he was a teenager, and in partnerships and business ownership since his late 20s. I'll let him tell you how old he is for us to know if this was a short period of time or a long period of time. Scott's ministry focus has primarily been on missions since 2005, with ongoing work in Mexico, Nicaragua, and Kenya. That's awesome. Scott will celebrate his 20th anniversary of being in his current business next year. So unless he started that as a baby, I don't know. And he is also the host of 2 podcasts. He's the host of the Leadership Moment podcast and From the Forefront podcast. And in the show notes of this episode, I will share the links with you to those podcasts. They're awesome. Whether you're in leadership, whether you're in ministry, whether you're in mission work, both of those podcasts will bless your life. And so I will have the link to those in the show notes. So Scott, welcome. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm stuttering.
Welcome.
Happy with the introduction. I'm stuttering. Thank you, Shayna. I appreciate it. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. So before we get into your own journey of how you have been able to blend faith and leadership, is there anything that you would like to add regarding the lesson that I just taught, or some comments about it?
Well, you put some things out there that I hadn't thought about, but the shoulded on, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but I was going, okay, what does that mean? That was pretty interesting. Yeah, I think the expectations of others can really be impactful, both for the good and not awesome. That really spoke to me.
Yeah. And like I said, and it usually comes from a place of good intentions, like with
Sure.
I'll just use my own story, for example. I went to school to be a therapist and graduated with a therapy degree and, was a successful therapist. And I was, healing people or assisting God in healing people and, making good money doing it. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a business coach. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to be a business coach. And people are like, well, you should really probably just focus on what it is that you've been focusing on. Like, why would you turn away from something that has been, yielding you such great rewards? But the reality is that if I would have listened to that, I would have probably not be where I am right now doing what it is that I know God is calling me to do, or maybe it would have taken me longer to get there. So yeah, sometimes we should on ourselves, and then other times people should on us, but that's one of the things that we've got to be willing to let go of.
Yes, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's good to remind ourselves of that.
So Scott, tell us a little bit about your ministry.
Okay. Well, we, as you mentioned, and thanks for the introduction there. We primarily focused in missions. I've been doing missions work and was involved in some missions training efforts in the in like the 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11 range. About that time, I started kind of formalizing what it is that I'm doing now in the mission side. Foundational Missions is I guess, the long form name, but we just call it FX Missions because it's not as many characters on the domain name. We don't want to have a domain name that goes on forever.
Right.
So fxmissions.com is where people can find more information about that. We started in the late 2000s, a little bit of a core team formulation. I was already going quite a bit, primarily in Mexico, also a little bit in Kenya, and Nicaragua came a little bit later. But we do and have done young leadership events kind of across those contexts. We've worked with orphanages and ministry schools, Bible schools, stuff like that, kind of in all those contexts. And we also work with local missionaries and ministries that are on the ground to kind of help encourage their efforts and develop relationships with them to continue on for the gospel.
That is awesome. Impressive. So, Scott,
thank you.
This is the Faith First Leadership Podcast, and we're always looking at how is it that we actually incorporate our faith into what it is that we do professionally, whether we're in ministry, whether we're in entrepreneurship, maybe we even work for someone else. So in your opinion, why is it important for leaders to rely on their faith when they're making major decisions at work or in their business?
Great question. Yes, I started the business when I was 8, by the way. So that 20th anniversary. As you said, no, that's not true. I've had quite a journey in response to your question when it comes to getting my faith more integrated in my business.
Uh-huh.
As with many people who experience a bit of success or get traction early in their professional careers, sometimes that momentum or those kind of initial successes can create a direction and a path for you that kind of has a mind of its own. And that, I think, happened to me a little bit early on. So the Lord really, I think, checked me up, if you will, and kind of interrupted my flow. I went in this real bell curve cycle, at least a couple of times where I did really well, kind of set records, overperformed, and then, got misdirected and kind of bottomed out on the other side. That happened at least 2 or maybe 3 times. And in that process, I discovered that, the Lord wanted to lead me more directly in my steps in business, maybe not for the conventional check boxes that everybody's trying to fill. I got plenty of money. I feel successful. I feel like I'm doing worthwhile work. I feel like, I'm going in a positive direction. I'm building a future I want to look at. I want to be a part of. Those are things that got reorganized for me when it comes to incorporating my faith in what I'm doing. And some of those processes were, a couple years along, at least 2 times, which don't get discouraged. If you keep following, you'll come out on the other side, which we did. But to me, it's been a big faith journey. And I think the Lord wants to do something in us that is, overcomes the world, or that has eternal consequence. And I'm not talking about just in the mission side. I'm obviously primarily involved in business day to day. But the short-term mission helps me be able to be consequential in both sides. So yeah, faith's real important, and getting the Lord's leadership on the steps that you take, both big and small, I think in business, they guarantee that you will have an eternal consequence.
Yeah. I want to unpack something a little bit that you just said, because I think it's important to take a look at this. You said sometimes the process is a long process and we shouldn't get discouraged. One of the things that I know for myself and for some of the leaders that I have worked with in the past, oftentimes we assume that if the process is either difficult or the process is taking a long time, that's a sign that whatever it is that we're doing is not something that we should be doing. Can you speak to that for a second from your experience?
Yeah, well, sadly, I've got a few stories to contribute there. I can remember one particular experience in business early on. I got into the business I'm in right now in 95 at the kind of the invitation of a friend who was in the business. I was working in radio sales at the time and had been in the radio industry for some years. And he invited me in. I came in, and probably in 3 years, we doubled the business size. We were doing great. Some things happened in the business that kind of changed the movement. And I was asked by one of the partners to join the partnership. And I thought, wow, this has got to be it. This is what the Lord's leading. And I didn't take the time that I needed to take to go through that process to really understand if it was the Lord's invitation or someone else. And I took what I consider now to be the bait, which ended up being bad for me, not just in a business sense. We continue to do well in the business side, but on the personal side, I got off track. Maybe it's the way I saw myself in terms of being a business owner, or I'm not sure what it was. But I think at that time, there was an option in front of me that was kind of based on my batting average at the time, but was also, it was a distraction that wasn't coming from God. So I should have been able to discern that, and I should have taken time to discern it. Maybe I made little of it or something. I can promise you that after the fact of how it went down, I was not ignoring it anymore in terms of importance. So I think we just got to be really careful in discerning the Lord's will and following the Lord, even when it might be counterintuitive. That would have been counterintuitive for me to say, no, I'm not. I don't think I want to get involved in the partnership. I'll keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that to me is really important, that we've got to be discerning. Not every voice that is on the wind is coming from the Lord. And I missed it on that one.
Right.
Thank you for joining Scott with today's Leadership Moment. We hope you've apprehended an inspirational nugget or two that, when activated in your own life, will be imparted into those you lead. You may contact Scott at scott@fxmissions.com. Visit fxmissions.com to learn more about how you can grow your own leadership and engage in missions. Until next time, good day, everyone.